Okay, so I've now been testing the Ally X for quite a while and decided to make a quick comparison with all the major differences between the ROG Ally with the Z1 Extreme, the original one, and the ROG Ally X, which also sports the same Z1 Extreme. So you can decide which one is the one that you need. Now, let's talk about that.
This is Hubwood.
Well, to get the obvious out of the way, the Ally X is black and the original Ally is white. No shit, Sherlock. And which one you prefer here is, of course, subjective. But be aware that you will be able to see fingerprints on the black surface, whereas the white surface is actually immune to that. And, well, the price is quite different, of course. Depending on where you live, the new version costs around $300 to $400 more, but there is, of course, a reason for that. Okay, now let's try to go through the rest of the differences, beginning with the most important to the least important, according to my opinion. The battery in the Ally X has twice the capacity of the original Ally, with now 80 watt-hours over 40 watt-hours. And to put it simple, it will just give you more or less exactly double the battery life, meaning depending on which games you play at which power setting, you can get between 2.5 to 6 hours of gameplay on the Ally X, while the old Ally only lasts, well, you've guessed it, half as long. The ROG Ally X now has 24 GB of 7500 MHz RAM over the 16 GB of 6400 MHz RAM for the original one, meaning you can now preset 8 GB of VRAM for the X and still have 16 GB of RAM left, which is pretty nice, to be honest. This will make the Ally X more future-proof, as right now more and more games start to actually utilize 16 GB or even more. And if you like to set like 5 GB of VRAM on the old Ally, you're left with only 11 GB system RAM, which can become a real problem. Also, the Ally X comes with a 1 TB M.2 SSD in the 2280 form factor, making it easier and cheaper to upgrade the SSD, since the original Ally was using a smaller and less common M.2 size, while the standard version only came with 512 GB. So you're most likely getting twice the disk space, which is a good idea since nowadays games like Warzone and stuff use over 100 GB for only one game. The Ally X now has 2 USB-C ports, whereas one of them is actually USB 4, just like on the Lenovo Legion Go, so you could plug in eGPUs, as in external desktop GPUs, to get more performance when you dock it at home. And I actually have a whole video about that, so check that one out afterwards if you like. The old Ally only has one USB 3.2 port, USB-C, as well as a proprietary XG connector for super expensive eGPUs or docking stations that you have to buy directly from ASUS. That second USB port on the X also makes it much easier for the new Ally to plug in an external SSD while charging the device at the same time. Or you could use more kinds of USB hubs, for example. Now, while the button layout could be described as identical more or less, at least at the front, the D-pad feels a bit more precise on the Ally X. At the top, the LB and RB and LT-RT buttons are a bit different. I guess it's a matter of taste, but I want to point out that the LT and RT button of the Ally X are super clicky. And I really like that. If you've seen my review of the MSI Claw, MSI really screwed that up, and here it's perfect. On the original Ally, it's fine as well though, just not as perfect. And at the back, they changed the size of the programmable M1 and M2 buttons, but to be honest, I don't use them anyway, so I can't really give an honest opinion about them. Now, I also want to mention that a lot of the original Allies did have issues with dying micro SD card slots, and ASUS didn't cover themselves with glory considering how they handled and still handle the RMA cases when it comes to a repair. But they promised that this issue is fixed for the Ally X, and well, I guess we'll see. Now, since the Ally X's battery is twice as big, the case is actually a bit thicker, making some USB hubs and stands probably unusable. Also, the original protection hulls for the regular Ally won't fit on the Ally X, of course. And it's also a few grams heavier than the old Ally, but I can't really feel the difference when holding them. It's only like 70 grams more, and that's okay, in my opinion, considering the battery size. Also, the grip on the new Ally X is a bit different since the two handles at the back are just a lot thicker and bigger. I never had to complain about the grip on the old version, but now that I've felt the Ally X, it's probably more comfortable. But that's subjective, after all, could be different for you. The gaming performance is very similar between these two, whereas the Ally X is a bit faster in quite a lot of games thanks to the faster and bigger RAM. But we're talking about like maybe 0 to 10% in most cases. I also have a full video comparing the two side by side, considering the gaming performance, so you can either watch that or the eGPU one next, or both. You should watch both of them. That's good for you, believe me. The cooling system is a bit different in both of them, but in my subjective opinion, that's going to be a difference that should not affect your decision between these two. You can run both of them at an acceptable noise level, especially on the lower wattages. Except for maybe the thing with the dying SD card slots. Before they fixed that on the original Ally, which was because they became too hot, so they now changed the fan curve. Yeah, well. And other than that, they are more or less identical. They have the same Z1 Extreme CPU, if we're taking the old Ally Z1 Extreme version that is. They have the same iGPU, which is the AMD 780M. They have the same 120Hz 7-inch adaptive sync display. They both come with 3.5mm audio jacks and an integrated fingerprint sensor in the power button. Both have the same decent speakers and both support Windows 11 and both use identical software, while the Ally X actually has a newer graphics driver version, and I'm wondering if ASUS will match the two handhelds over time on that matter. So in my personal opinion, you should choose the ROG Ally X over the original Ally if you really need better battery life, or if you plan on playing games that need lots of space and you don't want to upgrade the SSD by yourself, if you want to play games that need much RAM or VRAM, if you really hate white handhelds, and in general if you're just okay with spending quite much more money for some nice features. Overall, the old Ally clearly is the price to performance winner, but you will need to accept a few more flaws than with the new Ally X. An alternative could be to get the old Ally and get a good solid power bank like the 60-watt one from ASUS, which I reviewed, if you're okay with bringing that along, as that will double the Ally's battery life as well, and well, it costs less than $100. And you can also use that for other devices as well. And that's already all for today, only here for the differences. Hope that helped in your decision making. If it did, let me know in the comments. If it didn't, let me know as well. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye bye and cheers.